Good afternoon, Chelsea fans. We hope everybody is keeping well and enjoying themselves over the Christmas period. Chelsea Waves is back with another podcast ahead of Christmas after another testing week for the Blues on the road to Cardiff in the Carabao Cup and Newcastle in the league, with so much to dissect off the back of both games. We'll also be exploring the fallout from Maresca's recent comments and his decision seemingly to wage war on the Chelsea leadership, and whether this signals more uncertainty and change to come for Chelsea. We'll also be hearing from Aston Villa fan Brian Macintyre ahead of our top four crunch clash next Saturday at the Bridge. So without further ado, let's jump into it.
A week where Chelsea's blushes were spared. A late show in Wales midweek saw the Blues progress in the Carabao following a victory over League One Cardiff, while a welcome show of resilience saw Chelsea fight back after a galling first half at St James's Park.
Yeah, tricky week for Chelsea once again, and we never fare well when it's the double away fixtures back to back. Our home form's really picked up this year, so it looked a bit daunting, albeit against League One opposition in the Cup. I've given this week a 6 out of 10 for Chelsea. Firstly, starting with Cardiff away, which was job done, as you say, but very, very far from convincing for us. To be expected, I guess, to a large extent, given we had 11 changes to the lineup, with the exception of obviously Caicedo retaining his place due to his prior suspension. But this felt very much like another audition for the fringe players in Chelsea's squad, spurned by the likes of sort of Santos, Bonanotte, Badiashile, Tyreek George, Gittins, and perhaps Jorgensen as well. I think those players really had an opportunity to display their quality and stake a claim for a starting berth in the Champions League and Premier League 11, but really poor performances from those in particular. But the likes of Achiapong, um, Hato, I thought he was quite decent as well, but yeah, really disappointed in I think Badiashile in particular, who's demonstrating that he is not a viable alternative for us at centre back, which I think is brought into sharper focus given the injury to Levi Colwill and the need for a left-footed centre back there. Jamie Gittins really disappointed there. Again, League One opposition, a chance to go and take on your fullback and score a couple of goals, demonstrate your quality. I'm not seeing ability to dribble or shoot or anything from him at the moment. It's just massively disappointed, and I do want to pick up on Santos because I think the expectation from Chelsea fans all season was that he was going to come in and push for a place in the starting 11, maybe at the expense of Enzo Fernandez, and I've been waiting for that all season actually, but really doesn't look up to scratch just yet, and it might be a product of him being slightly misprofiled by Maresca. We've seen him play in deeper roles and more advanced as a sort of secondary striker or central attacking midfielder as he was against Forest away, but more questions than answers, I think, from the Chelsea squad in that game. Couple of positives, as I mentioned. Hato not played since the Carabao game, where he really struggled, put in a decent performance there, keeping the ball, winning it back, showing positional awareness, I think, throughout as well. Achipong as well was fantastic throughout, even in that right back position where we've been saying he should be, our second or third option there if James and Gusto aren't available, where we'd previously seen Trevor Chalobah. So he's demonstrated what he can bring to this squad, not just at centre back, but also at full back. And ultimately, this game was a struggle. It required us bringing or summoning the strength of the first team players, Garnacho and Joao Pedro in particular, to make the difference there. But ultimately, we are in the semi-final and face a daunting prospect of a two-legged tie against Arsenal with Caicedo suspended for the first leg. So we will be crossing our fingers for a Palace dub on Tuesday night.
Progression in the draw and into the semi-finals, hopefully with a chance of Wembley there. Just want to pick up on that kind of questioning of the new signings, questioning of the quality. I think there's every right to point fingers at the SDs and to question individual players, bar potentially kind of Tosin and Jorgensen. There is an argument for each and every one of these players, a little asterisk, that were they integrated into a fully settled side, allowed to flourish with a team that knows its patterns of play, potentially we could see kind of a different start to life at Chelsea for a few of these players. And ultimately, winning breeds confidence. You want to start well at a new club to really kick on. Instead, they're all thrust together in a soccer aid-esque 11. The consistent churn from the SDs is forevermore going to lead to these cases whereby players have absolutely zero chemistry taken to the pitch and are expected to perform and expected to knock on the door for the first team. So I would caveat the above with the point that the conditions are not optimal to hit the ground running in Chelsea Blue.
So jumping back to the Premier League, George, and what already looked like a very daunting away fixture in that dreaded Saturday 12:30 slot at a ground we've historically struggled at, St James's Park, which has tended to be kryptonite for Chelsea and young squads, one with petulance like ours in particular, and that is precisely how we saw it unfold on Saturday with the concession of an early goal to Nick Waltemada. We saw Chelsea players, diving up in arms, demonstrating that sort of petulance that we've called out for weeks now. And frankly, we were quite fortunate not to be three down before half time. But ultimately, we showed some fight and some spirit that leaves us with, I think, some positives to take from this game. How did you see it, George?
An all too familiar story that first half. I have to concede, I got a little bit excited when I saw both the Newcastle lineup, which we knew had absentees in the back line. We saw young Lewis Miley at right back and no Joe Linton, who I predicted as my goal scorer, coupled with a strong, potentially first 11 from Chelsea, would call for Enzo Fernandez to be dropped, given kind of the fatigue entering this game in recent weeks. And it was the return to the side for Moises Caicedo. However, deja vu, very much like our outing at St James's back in May when I was in the stands. My brother felt the same fate. Tonali opening the scoring within minutes last season. This time up, Walter Messi, and went from bad to worse. I mean, you mentioned the word petulance there. I really want to pick up on this word here. We rightly called out Malo Gusto for his 10 out of 10 showing last week and recent top performances. We saw the all too familiar ugly side from him. I think the moment where he was kind of lounging on the floor, leaving Anthony Gordon in acres of space, gifting him a gilt edge opportunity that was ultimately denied by a world-class save from Bobby Sanchez, just kind of spoke volumes to the chaos that ensues when the chips are down for this Chelsea side. Much like at Leeds a few weeks back, where we saw kind of Esteval kick out petulantly, should have been red carded there. We saw a quick accumulation of yellow cards here. Incidences like that, mention of Mallow, and then ultimately goal number two, which I'd say a tactical element here that I've picked up, and it seems opposition managers are picking up. The cutback into the cross seems to consistently leave our players all at sea. So Anthony Gordon receiving the ball, cutting back, whipping the ball in. It just seems to be Newcastle players queuing up at the back post. I think there was a couple of set pieces where they employed the same technique. Definitely one for, I would argue, Maresca, but also the all-famed set piece coach to really delve into and improve on. I want to also call out the unforgivable lackadaisical approach from Wesley Fofana. Again, we've praised that centre-back pairing of late, solid at home, a string of clean sheets. But that play, dribbling out not once but twice, and ultimately getting his pocket picked by Anthony Gordon away at St James's in the early minutes, is just a severe question mark over approach, either both at the individual level and you question at the managerial level. These kind of lapses seem to be far too frequent in these big ties away from home. In terms of credit, we're going to call out Caicedo. Back to the 11. Again, it seemed like a one-man midfield in that first half and really grew into it in the second, dancing on Bruno Guimaraes at times and really competing against top-level opposition. Reece James, obviously that magical free kick. And I would wager that it really needed a moment of magic for Chelsea to have any chance to get back into the game. Such moments cannot be relied on for future fixtures, but I was glad to see a little bit of resilience with Chelsea ultimately squaring the game with a stunning goal from João Pedro. We've criticised him of late, but that solo goal really was a reminder of the talent, the glimpses of talent he showed at that Club World Cup where we prematurely coined R9 reincarnate for him.
George, I know you're chomping at the bit to discuss a certain Argentine winger in the post-mortem of this match, so I will pass you on to discuss Garnacho in detail and that horror show of a performance that he delivered off the back of, a positive match in the Carabao Cup away to Cardiff, 2 goals on the score sheet when he came on there, and really sort of back to square one there, was it?
Alejandro Garnacho. You and I think, both deemed this signing. For once, we were in agreement with the sporting directors. A snip, market value, a market opportunity at kind of 40 million, 21-year-old with a serious portfolio of performances, minutes in the legs at the top level for Manchester United, and some high-profile goals. I think he's kind of visions of him in red, scoring in big games. Um, but it was a really ugly showing on Saturday. I think you ask any winger, left or right, worth their salt, dream scenario has been fed one-on-one with your fullback driving into the box. I'll add Lewis Miley tax to that. He's up against a teenager, a midfielder team converted to right back, and ultimately had zero joy. It was a complete disaster class. I'm seeing a litany of fail compilations on the timeline, not only dribbling into his man, I'm not sure he beat him once, but also on the rare occasion where he did get a glimpse at goal, just keeps inexplicably spooning the ball over the bar. And ultimately, operating in a top level side, competing on all fronts now, these are the kind of chances, opportunities. You're not going to convert all of them, but you're expecting at least a goal or assist from the litany of chances there.
We said that if we had a certain Antoine Semenyo at left wing in that game, he probably walks away with a hat trick at least, and I think that just speaks to the quality and the profile of signings we're currently making under this Blueco leadership, which we'll get onto in a bit. But feels like a massive opportunity missed there. Obviously, he's a massive talking point ahead of the January transfer window. Looks a snip at 65 million, probably going to Liverpool, City, or United. How he could do with a player of his quality and output right now in that left wing position.
Hat-trick potentially a bold claim, but definitely
Couple
troubling
at
the short
least.
score sheet, you'd imagine. We both tuned into that Spurs Liverpool game. Beyond that as well, I've said there's a serious dearth of quality in the wing positions in the Premier League right now. That very much dictates that the likes of Antoine Semenyo are gold dust. But it's definitely a position that the sporting directors consistently seem to get wrong for Chelsea.
And just to end on this match, George, wanted to get your view on the much debated penalty claim for Anthony Gordon following that quite excessive shoulder barge, I guess you could call it, from Trevor Chalobah.
I think on the balance, you'd have to concede. You've seen those given more than not. I do question here whether there's an element of kind of umpire's call, or the referee with a clear view has seen it and VAR not wanting to overturn the referee's call, which is a element of the matter that ultimately I think should be absolved in the decision making. It should be judged in its own merit. I wonder as well if there's an element of Anthony Gordon tax here as well. He's got previous of kind of looking for challenges, flopping at times. But yeah, I think we both concede that we'd be frustrated were that decision not to go in our favour. But ultimately, a little bit of fortune for Chelsea. I'm hoping it's not Josh King 2.0, whereby we see a string of refereeing karmic calls go against us in the upcoming weeks.
Jumping into our topic of the week, Maresca versus the Chelsea senior leadership. We saw some emerging friction over the course of the last 10 days or so between the manager and the sporting directors, I think in particular, following that very tricky run of form. Following those games against Leeds, Bournemouth in particular, and the growing question marks over Maresca's rotation from above, which ultimately resulted in those quotes, the very cryptic quotes from Maresca following the win to Everton last weekend, and the subsequent news from David Ornstein regarding Man City's interest in Maresca replacing Pep Guardiola at the end of this season, which is happening obviously against the the backdrop of him changing agents, Maresca changing to Georgie Mendes's Gestitute agency, which always signals that there is a move on the horizon. What do you think is happening here, George? Is this a power struggle or is Maresca angling for an exit?
I have to say, cast time back a few days. I think we both were Team Maresca on this one. Kind of talks of infighting, potentially question marks over selection from Maresca, which we have questioned ourselves, but very rich coming from the sporting directors. Ultimately, Connolly and Lawrence Stewart, along with the board, so often mistakenly labelled as one as Bowley, but realistically, Barley seems to be at the helm now. Very much fingers should be pointed their way in terms of the overall pie, the overall apportion of blame. Best part of 2 billion spent in the transfer market, and ultimately Chelsea is still not competing at the top. Constant talks of kind of harvest in the future, reinventing the wheel, the sort of hubris that we've seen from the England cricket team this past week, and we've all seen how that's gone. The Ornstein Bomber, however, has potentially changed my mindset on this one. So Enzo Maresca touted as the potential successor for Pep Guardiola at Manchester City. We've had that reminder that kind of repositioned under Mendes. Are these comments him carving out a bit of friction to ultimately engender a move to Manchester City? It does all make sense. This is very much a sharp reminder to me. That's why I believe Maresca is yet to fully endear himself within the Chelsea fan base. Ultimately, I believe he is a self-preservation merchant. Constant dampening expectations in the media. Chelsea are not in a title race. This is not the Chelsea of old. The fans need to adjust and reconsider. Permanent tinkering of lineups, inexplicable lineups, seldom a lineup that the fans predict and call for. Right backs playing an attacking midfield. The cynic in me believes that this consistent tinkering is very much looking for praise when it goes right and potentially pointing the finger towards the sporting director and the squad he's been given when the results don't go our way, ultimately blaming recruitment. We've also had strong suspicions that he's been deploying the likes of Palmer off the left or limited minutes for Esteval. Again, he would posit side over self. I would potentially, maybe cynically argue self over side over self, and that self being Enzo Maresca.
There's obviously been a lot of discourse following that Ornstein bomber George around, I guess, how good a manager is Enzo Maresca and would he be a viable replacement for Pep Guardiola, given everything he's demonstrated at Leicester and Chelsea so far? So I wanted to put this to you, George, and just get a bit of a temperature reading in terms of how Maresca stacks up against other Premier League managers and other European managers, and whether you think they would be an upgrade on him. So I'm going to put a little quiz to you now, if that is all right. Starting off with Oliver Glasner, would he be an upgrade? If so, why?
Tough. It very much feels old school Chelsea. That three at the back would have fit like a glove under Abramovich's Chelsea. I'd probably have the two of those um, close to parity on paper. I'd give Glasner the edge, but in terms of fit for Chelsea in this current structure, I'd probably stick with Enzo Maresca marginally.
Liam Rossini, much adored amongst the Blueco fan base.
I know yourself and Hugh are both massive advocates of Liam Rossini. I would, however, here state that Enzo marginally has the pedigree for the here and now.
Unai Emery.
Man of the moment. So we would speak at length later, but I very much admire his kind of resilience and unity he creates. I think quite clearly he is ahead of Maresca in terms of pedigree pecking order. Whether we could prize him away is very unlikely.
Xabi Alonso, who struggled at Real Madrid.
He has, but it's a very unique requirement to thrive in that Madrid role. I'd argue more man management required there, rather than kind of tactical prowess. I actually think he would, beyond his Liverpool connections, be a prime fit for Chelsea stylistically in terms of what the sporting directors want, play style, um, defined attacking football. I'd be inclined to say yes, but I do wonder whether just that Liverpool connection, as we've seen with Benitez before with Pochettino, potentially would blur those lines. So I'm going to stick with Maresca there.
Andoni Iraola.
While his stocks were very high, there's definitely been a drop off there, so much to the point that I now do not believe he would be well received by the Chelsea fan base, despite, as I say, his clear positive credentials. I mean, he's had to make do with a shell of a back line this season, and injuries to high profile players. But again, I'd marginally stick with Enzo Maresca.
And I think you've answered this one already based on the association with Liverpool that you called out regarding Xavi Alonso, but this is a bonus round, Jurgen Klopp.
I'm actually going to go completely back on myself here and say that would be a phenomenal appointment, and the Chelsea fans would actually very well receive this one more as a glow, as a Fabregas-esque pickup for Chelsea. Undoubtedly a top tier manager. Remains to be seen whether he's still got the teeth to perform at the top level. I know he's quite cozy in his current Leipzig role, but I think most Chelsea fans would welcome Klopp purely to boil piss, but also his outstanding credentials.
Excellent. There you have it.
Time now for the opposition view. Up next for Chelsea is the form team of Europe, Aston Villa. And we're joined by friend of the pod and top villain, Ryan Macintyre. Welcome.
Cheers, George. Thanks for having me on.
Good to have you, mate. Good, ideal timing for this pod. A 10-game winning streak in all competitions, 10 out of 11 wins in the league, sees Villa now just 3 points off top. You must be buzzing.
Yeah, I mean, very unexpected given the start of the season as well. I think we always knew Emery would turn it around, but I didn't think it would be this drastic in terms of if you look, like it's really been a season of two halves so far. I think there is a slight discrepancy in between where we are in the league versus our performances. I think it's probably fair to say. I think we're going to come on to the XG debate in a bit, but you can't argue with 10 wins out of 11. Ultimately, like, look only gets you so far. I think if you look at the start of the season, I think there was a bit of negativity around the club around the transfers. I think there was a real panic. I think that's ultimately what cost Monchi, our director of football, his job as well. If you look at the players we brought in, like Sancho and Harvey Elliott, I think that was a real sort of panic situation, partly because of our PSR, because we couldn't really sign players permanently, but also because of the poor season we had. But neither of those have really came in and made a good start to the team. So I think really what's changed between the start and now has mainly been due to just ironing out the new system. With Rodgers now moving from the 10 onto the left and having Tielemans in as our second striker, I feel like that's probably been the biggest impact compared from the start of the season to now with our recent results.
Interesting. Let's say our kind of take on Villa is very much the same kind of unit from last year. But honestly, just immense kind of resilience and unity in tandem with that individual quality. So I think there was a comeback against Brighton, 2-0 down at the Amex, which was phenomenal. Same again against West Ham the other day. To go again against Arsenal, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Emery is like very tactician heavy. So from what the players say in interviews, is they will spend hours in team meetings going through how they want to set up. So you're absolutely right about the team unit thing. And the coming back the coming back from like a losing position has all been a thing this season, to be fair. I felt like last season we were a little bit shaky in the last 10 minutes of games, but now I feel like that's really flipped on its head. Yeah, the West Ham and Brighton games really stand out to me in terms of games I think 2 seasons ago we probably would have lost, but now we're ending up winning. I mean, the Arsenal game was absolutely wild. I think we actually deserved to win that game on balance. Obviously, Buendia nicked it at the end, but overall on the day, I think we were rightful winners there.
There's been a lot of talk around kind of XG. Yourself and I both from a data background. I do think those XG scorelines are kind of misrepresentative of kind of game state. Obviously, it's a side holding a lead is going to be kind of shielding more pressure, less need to go forward, etc.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's an indicator, but it probably doesn't tell the whole story. I think the reason why we're scoring more speculative shots this season is because of the change of personnel. So if you look from the departures last season, Bailey and Rashford have left, which means we really don't have that much pace in the starting lineup at the moment. We mainly have like ball carriers like Rodgers, for instance. So when we're coming up against teams and we get into the final third, more often or not, we're coming up against a low block, so we're having to have shots from further out. I think that's probably like our one weakness this season is that we are missing out on pace. Whether we go something and get something in January to try and help with that, be interesting to see because Gassand, who we brought in from France, hasn't really managed to nail his way into the squad. And then when you look at the bench, like Sancho, again, another ball carrier. So I think the one sort of weakness in our team at the moment is pace on the wings.
Interesting. I think I saw over 40% of Villa's goals now have come from outside the box, which is insane. I mean, there's a lot of chat about that not being sustainable, but when you look at the quality of those individual players, the likes of Rodgers, Tielemans, McGinn, even Matty Cash has a strike on him. I would argue that potentially that is a kind of sustainable solution. It's very much a change in tack from that kind of Guardiola style of play that seems to have enraptured the league of passing the ball into net. So long may it continue as a neutral, but hopefully not at the Bridge on Saturday. So we've had your kind of take on Villa, which you're obviously close to. We're always interested to hear the opposition view on the circus that is Chelsea FC.
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, it's similar with, I would say, nearly every club in the league this season. It's just a lack of consistency. I think some of the Chelsea games I've watched, I've been really impressed with, and then there'll be the result which I don't see, and I'm like, how has that ended up happening? I watched the Chelsea Newcastle game on Saturday. I thought it was a really good game. Some of your players I really like. I think Caicedo is an unreal midfielder. I think he bossed it against Newcastle. But then some of the other ones I'm just not 100% sure on. Like Garnacho, I think has no end product. Um, and I just think when you couple that with potentially a lack of like one or two real senior players in the squad, that's probably what's contributing to the lack of consistency. Like sometimes you will have these really great performances, but if you don't have that sort of spine steadying the ship, that's probably where you're going to run into issues. To be honest with you, I'm a bit confused with Chelsea at the moment because obviously you've got Reece James. I was actually wanting to ask you about this. From what I've seen in the last couple of games, he's been playing in midfield. Is that due to injuries? Is that because Maresca wants to play him higher up the pitch? What's actually happening with your midfield at the moment?
Yes, so I think there's been a lot of strain on both Caicedo and Enzo. The replacements, Lavia and the new guy, Sugo, just seem to be permanent sick beds. So there's not been a lot of rotation there. I think yeah, that's probably the driving factor. Caicedo been out for
Hmm.
kind of 3-4 games, but even prior to that, last season we were seeing this same tactic deployed. We've often said that Enzo Fernandez can't play in a two-man midfield, so potentially it is just adding that extra body there, a little bit more defensive solidity. But also I think Gusto's improved and is definitely highly rated in Enzo's eyes. So potentially
Hmm.
just a case of getting top players that you can trust on the pitch.
Yeah, that's fair. The only other thing I was thinking of Chelsea before coming on was, do you take much note of the amount of red cards you've had this season? It feels like you've had quite a few.
Absolutely. No, there's quite clearly a discipline issue there. I think we talked at length on this pod um, around kind of the petulance at Newcastle. When the chips are down, we do seem to lash out. I think even
Hmm.
Esteval a couple of weeks back against Leeds kind of kicked out ridiculously and should have been sent off as well. So that's potentially another one that should have been. You could argue Reece James at the weekend could easily have had a red as well. I'd argue that is probably correlation with the lack of experience, but definitely something that
Yeah, symptom of a young
Maresca,
squad.
yeah, but something that Maresca needs to clamp down on. I mean, we can't keep making that excuse that we're a young, inexperienced squad and then keep signing young, experienced players. So something's got to change on that front.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think it's definitely a symptom of sort of a lack of like a few more real senior players in the squad to just nip that in the bud. The only thing I was trying to draw comparisons on between Chelsea and Villa is obviously the relationship with the manager and the owners. So it feels like like Emery and the owners are very much all pulling in the same direction. It feels like they've kind of given Emery the keys to the castle. In relation to Maresca's comments on lack of support the other week, how do you see that playing out? Like, do you think that's like a little speed bump and it'll be fine, or do you think he's playing with fire?
Yeah, it's a great call out. I do think there's been this kind of obsession with reinventing the wheel at Chelsea. New kind of blue
Mm.
coat American ownership, thinking they can go for this groundbreaking Moneyball strategy, whereby they sign these young props of players, and they very much have a sporting director hierarchy with the coach being nothing more than a coach. But ultimately, you look at football history, all the top sides in Premier League. You look at City's Guardiola, Fergie's United, and it's very much the model of the manager calling the shots. Even pains me to say it, Arsenal at the minute, Villa. It's clear that they are the face of the club. They are the main men. So I think it's a very good call up. The predictions for Saturday, then. How do you think the game will play out, and what are we going to say for the final score?
I mean, we'll definitely concede. We're hardly keeping any clean sheets this season. I don't think we've been that good at the Bridge in recent years. I think you beat us 3-0 last season. I remember a 3-0 on Boxing Day a couple of years ago that really sticks out in mind in terms of games I've watched of Chelsea Villa. But we're in an unreal vein of form. So I think it may be the game where we finally slip up and don't get 3 points, but I could see maybe another 1-1 or 2-2 draw, honestly. How do you think it will play out?
Interesting. He's not been in form of late slash this season, but even if Villa hadn't had joy at the Bridge, I feel like Ollie Watkins has and potentially will. So I'm going to call another early Ollie Watkins goal. I'm going to call on Rob Sanchez to keep out some of those long shot strikes, but I'm going to call a Chelsea spin to end that Aston Villa streak and please the SG's philosophy and go for a 2-1 Chelsea following a Watkins opener. And let's call on Garnacho to convert some of those chances that he's floundered at the weekend.
I actually think the conditions of this match against Villa next Saturday quite suit this Chelsea team, who tend to thrive with less expectation and the weight that carries on a young squad, as we've discussed. The momentum fully with Villa and Unai Emery 7 points ahead of Chelsea, coming to the Bridge where I don't believe they've got a particularly good record. We beat them 3-0 last season in the same fixture, so I'm backing us to actually get over the line here and bring Villa's winning streak to an end. So I'm calling a 3-1 win to Chelsea with a red card to Villa, Palmer to get a double, including a penalty, and Joao Pedro to get on the score sheet as well.
Thanks a lot, mate. Would say best of luck for Saturday, but I'm hoping we can end that streak. But sadly, we're at that point of the season already where our title hopes appear to be all but done. So I will be a villain for the rest of the season if you guys can stay in the mix.
No, I appreciate that. I think I do think we will. Like, I'm a bit of a realist. I know that fan on the overlap was saying we're in a title race. I disagree with him, but I think I think top four is definitely on the cards, and I think Saturday will be a really open game. To be fair, it should be a good game of football.
Brilliant, mate. Have a great Christmas. Cheers.
Nice one. You too, man. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in once again this week. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we'll see you all next Saturday at the Bridge ahead of that massive game against Villa. And in the meantime, wishing you all a very Merry Christmas.